Today I'm joined by Colin Gunn, the CEO of Toll Aviation, to talk about the importance of uncrewed systems and how Australia, the US and other Indo-Pacific countries can improve their defence and emergency response efforts. Colin, thanks for joining me.
Hey Todd, it's great to be here, mate. Thanks for the invitation and I'm looking forward to it.
Mate, I'm obviously very familiar with your operations, including the New South Wales and ACT aeromedical response and fleet that you run, your ACE training centre in Sydney and also your White Fleet supporting defence. But today I really want to delve into Toll's uncrewed systems, where that particular program's come from, but especially with your VBAT system as well.
Yeah.
I'd really love to get into that today, mate. But before we do, just to give today a little bit of context as well, now tell me a little bit about the Toll Aviation background, if we could, and the primary lines of effort to give our conversation a bit of colour today.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I would say that Toll is an integrated aviation service provider. And what I mean by integrated is we've got operational and training approvals across rotary wing, fixed wing and uncrewed systems so that we can present a solution that optimises each of those modes of flight for the client we're supporting. We've existed for about 20 years. So early days before I joined, sort of pre-2012, we were the largest helicopter firefighting company in the country. So Black Saturday, we had some 20 helicopters sort of simultaneously airborne and helping with those efforts. I transferred from the Army to the Reserves in 2012, joined Toll direct as the chief pilot. That was a point in time for a strategic change in what the helicopter business was doing in Toll. There are a bunch of overseas firefighting aviation companies moving to Australia, which was driving the price to rock bottom, and it was really we felt a bit of a race to the bottom. So we had a change in strategy and sort of moved toward where we are now. When I first joined was interesting though because it was a bit of a soft start in one respect. The initial flying operations supporting post-leaving Army were Op Tanager in Timor as the civil provider for trooping and medevac on Op Tanager and across in the Solomon Islands from 2012 through 17 supporting Ramsey, the federal police and occasionally the Navy over in the Solomon Islands. So a very soft start and a very familiar environment in that respect. What was I guess a more interesting change in that transition out of the military was the whole commercial side, pay, salaries, making a buck each month, and just coming up with a strategy to balance that well, supporting the client, earning enough that you stay alive as a business, and having a good growth strategy. That was all pretty new coming out of the military.
Yeah, I recall those days because obviously you had the pleasure of working closely with you from 2012 as well, and seeing that change in strategy was amazing. I guess when you think about the risk as well, it's like, okay, this is a pretty comfortable space, we're putting out fires, we're flying people around in the Sollies and over in Timor to, no, hang on, this is going to be our line of effort. So I'm really interested to see, especially having seen that change from 2012 to now, and especially in the uncrewed space with your strategy around moving into the UAS space. Now that particular business started with a bit of an acquisition and an acquisition strategy. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we'd been admiring the uncrewed market, I'd say, for 7 or 8 years, and we were trying to determine when was the appropriate time to enter the market. For several years there were like systems available and trying to find a role for the system. So there was, we perceived not the right time to enter. You mentioned the New South Wales aeromedical contract. So interestingly, one of the, sparks for us acquiring the uncrewed business and bringing that on board was to assist the aeromedical business. So we're very regularly up in the mountains, the Blue Mountains, the Dividing Range, west of Sydney, in canyons and helping people out on their worst days. Ditto, we're over at the cliffs, sort of each side of Sydney, often at night in a low and slow environment looking for an injured or a missing person. And that's not an environment that a helicopter likes to be. So one of the catalysts was we will have, hopefully this year, a drone in each of our helicopters. So when we go to that environment and it's not really obvious where the patient is and how we're going to help them out, we'll land the helicopter, we'll turn it off, we'll launch a drone, we'll fly, we'll find the person, We'll fly the drone down into wherever they are, have a conversation with them or colleagues who are nearby, assess the patient, come up with a plan. Are we going to winch this person out? Is it feasible for that? Is it safe to do that? If not, then how are we going to help the paramedics get from the helicopter to the patient to do their job in a safe manner? So it really became about improving patient outcomes and improving the safety predominantly of the special access paramedics getting to a scene to enable them to do that safely. So I guess one line of effort in the strategy, which I guess is what kicked us off into it. We had to decide up front. I guess there were two ways to do it. We could organically grow an uncrewed business, so employ some smart people, which we're pretty good at doing, write all of the manuals, start operations, get some CASA approvals, get some runs on the board, and then get after what we really wanted to get after. Or, plan two, find a good company with good trust of the regulator that conducts safe operations with a good reputation in market and hit the ground running. So we went with plan B. We acquired a business called Air Support Queensland. It was just a privately owned business by Wayne and Leslie Condon. Excellent reputation with CASA, excellent reputation for safety of operations. Been doing it for sort of 7 or 8 years before we came together. All of the right approvals that we sought to get after the markets that we seek. And so that became the plan. And as at February 2023, they joined the Toll group, and it's going really well and on track so far.
That's fantastic. So, mate, can you share your plans with us to the extent that you can? Is the strategy just around aeromedical, or are there other lines of effort that you're pursuing?
Yeah, good question, Todd. There are absolutely other lines of effort. One of the biggest challenges we've got right now is there are so many opportunities within uncrewed systems. It's a little difficult to actually figure out what is the strategy, what are we targeting, what are we leaving behind. But, as best I can describe it now, it's a multi-pronged strategy. So, a big focus of our aviation business, our helicopter business, is training. So training to help us have the best staff online conducting the job, training to help industry have good and qualified and safe pilots. So we've taken that across to the drone business. They're already a really good and long-standing training organisation. So training is definitely part of it. And we want to start and keep right at the ab initio, the start level, so people get trained right the first time, so they learn all the rules, comply with the rules. And in that way, I think we'll see the acceleration of uncrewed systems into civil airspace occur really safely. So right from the front, we want to be involved, through to the other end. So over the last couple of years, the uncrewed business has been training elements of the 3 Defence Force services. And more recently, they're playing a little piece in the Air Force's transition to having sort of permanent uncrewed capabilities. So, taking some Air Force folks from ab initio drone training on a 2-kilo quadcopter, through to operating something which is potentially teaming aircraft, collaborative combat aircraft, that kind of stuff. So we're jumping in at the front end of that to prepare some designated RAF folks for what's coming for them in the future, which is pretty exciting.
So, Colin, beyond training, what are your strategies aside from aeromedical around disaster resilience and other forms of and other areas of operations where uncrewed systems can be used?
Yeah, look, that's a fastly growing area of interest for us. So, as I said, we started off looking in the aeromedical context, but it's pretty clear that a priority for the nation, certainly for the government at the moment, is to improve Australia's disaster resilience. We think that advanced uncrewed systems are a vastly underutilised piece in that. And if I can give an example, you could have an uncrewed system that could go up and fly for sort of 10, 15 hours, and with a 3-kilogram payload, sit up at 20,000 feet, stare straight through 15,000 feet of smoke, and identify every person, every vehicle, and every aviation asset that's on that fireground. So that level of oversight is pretty phenomenal and would be so helpful. And whilst doing that, the whole time it's live transmitting, a visual image, a thermal image, a synthetic aperture radar image to those that need to see it so they can sort of plan how best to get after that. So, in firefighting, there's absolutely a place for uncrewed systems. Same with floods, like mapping where the water is, what's going on. Climate change comes in there as well, right? So, there are sensors right now that can, fly up the Antarctic coastline and map the ice shelves, see whether they're growing or degrading. That kind of a thing. So think in the environment, climate change, disaster resilience, there is it's an untapped resource at the moment, and we see indications that the agencies are looking at it. The Australian Department of Climate Change, Energy and Water seems to be a leading agency that appreciates the value of uncrewed systems and is getting after that in a good way. What we see is the ability for a really good system such as the VBAT that we're offering, and there are others, to support like a multi-agency operation so that it gets utilised all year round, delivers government value for money. It has a day job that might be in surveillance, border protection, environment, biosecurity, that kind of stuff, and is able to be re-rolled toward any kind of a disaster that might occur. Rather than having, I guess, what we've historically had in Australia for disaster resilience is static fleets of aviation and ground assets that wait just in case.
And the cost to government for those assets to be on standby is phenomenal.
Yeah. And I guess the third part of our strategy, and I'm sure we'll talk about it some more today, is there is a great opportunity within the military. That's never been more front of lobe than now with the war in the Ukraine, and everybody getting to see day by day what uncrewed systems influence is in those environments. So a decent part of our strategy is certainly looking for how we can best support our partners in defence and get the right equipment to the warfighter in a useful timeframe.
Colin, you've recently entered into an agreement with Shield AI. Can you tell us a little bit about that arrangement?
Look, Shield AI have a product called the VBAT. It's the class of drone is a Group 3 uncrewed system. I first heard of the VBAT about 4 years ago, and it caught my attention because it delivers a Group 3 level of capability, so sort of carrying 10 to 20 kilograms of payload, airborne for 10 to 20 hours, the kind of capability that the Australian Army's operated for about 15 years. But what was different about it was that it has this tiny footprint. So you literally put it on a square of dirt, on a rooftop, on a ship, wherever you like, and it just takes off vertically and recovers vertically, a bit like a SpaceX rocket, to be honest. And it's got this tiny logistic footprint for the same great capability. So the air vehicle itself caught our attention sort of 3.5 to 4 years ago. And then I think mid-21, Shield AI actually acquired the company that had the design on the air vehicle and started sort of pumping really smart technology into it. Like Shield, to my knowledge, are an AI tech company based in Texas, and they've taken over that air vehicle as the best platform to put their AI autopilot into. So then I started researching, what's an AI autopilot? What does that deliver to you? And there's some pretty phenomenal benefits that we can get into. So we formed the opinion that, hey, this is a fantastic system. It's a fantastic system for a military role. It's a fantastic system in a border protection kind of a role. And it also, with the sensors it can carry that currently exist, it's a fantastic system to get after biosecurity, environment, climate change kind of work. We focus on that as a system. The deal with Shield started at the Avalon Air Show last year. So in February, about the same time actually as we did the acquisition of the business. So we started a conversation at Avalon about, hey, this is us, we're Toll Aviation, do helicopters, a bit of planes, getting into the uncrewed through an acquisition, have some great approvals, have the trust of the regulator. Toll Aviation currently support and have supported the Army, the Navy. We do search and rescue for the 3 defence forces. Our immediate parent within Toll Group is Toll Government Defence. They've got contracts with Border Force, Home Affairs and whatnot. So, we could be a great partner to introduce your system in the Australian context. And so we got, a little bit of their attention at Avalon over a few meetings. We followed that up with a trip across to their international sales headquarters in Abu Dhabi and had another discussion. And, a few months later, we'd struck a deal where we realised that combining the strengths of both was the best way to push VBAT and to explain how the benefits of VBAT in the Australian market.
Wow. And mate, you've recently been doing some amazing testing with Navy and other organisations in Australia, launching the VBAT off the back of ships and some other cool stuff. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as I mentioned earlier, I spent a bit of time in defence procurement, and to be honest, one of the things that I really enjoyed that time, got involved in some great sort of aviation-related projects. But one of my frustrations was the time it takes from good idea through to fielded and declaring final operational capability. And, with a helicopter system, if that process takes 3 to 4 years, that's maybe acceptable because, it takes that kind of period of time for a new and better helicopter to come to market and to be fully certified. But that kind of a time frame is just completely unworkable with an uncrewed aerial system. Like, these things are getting overtaken, at the moment, probably year on year. In the future, that'll be sort of 6 months on 6 months. So we feel that the VBAT is the best platform, particularly in a maritime kind of embarked environment for Australia, and we think it'll hold that ground for a few years. So our strategy to bring it to market was, let's find a way in which we can showcase the kit. Let's showcase what it can actually do today. Let's show that to the clients. Let's throw away the marketing brochure. Give us your senior pilot, give us your senior engineers, and we'll fully endorse them on the type at negligible cost. So you can understand the capability yourself. You can understand where it does or does not fit within your ecosystem of equipment. And so that's what we did. We got the system across. We invested in bringing a few of the Shield AI trainers across. Over 6 to 8 weeks, we ran a course. We had a couple of Defence Force personnel on the course, state police, another federal agency, and a couple of our own folks. And we qualified them fully on the VBAT in the land environment and then in the embarked environment so that they get it. And it was a really, I guess, ambitious plan. It took a lot of work with CASA, so we did it all under the civil aviation regs. So that's a pretty new thing to have achieved in Australia. We had to get the VBAT on effectively the Australian Type Register as an uncrewed system, get the right approvals for a sub 150 kilo vertical takeoff and land liquid fuel drone. We had to find some airspace. So we worked really, really closely with CASA to open up some airspace for the flight component of that at Marulan in New South Wales, working in with the University of Sydney and CASA, and that was fantastic. At the back end, once we finished the training, we took the system across to WA, and we conducted some ground-based operations over there from a place called Binduke, setting up Marulan took us a few months to organise. Getting an approval to operate in that first land-based operation in WA took a week or two. And so we were trying to shorten the process to bring CASA on a journey of, these systems are going to be required somewhere, sometime at short notice. So there's not always going to be the opportunity to spend days or weeks or months to get approval to operate them there. So part of the process was to try and shorten that time frame and to bring CASA on the journey and for everybody to feel sort of safe and that it was well risk managed. And the crown at the back end of that was we hired a decommissioned Armidale class patrol boat, the Sentinel, and we put it to sea for a day. We had the sort of tiny aft starboard quarter of the rear of the deck, and we went to sea. So we worked with Navy, op airworthiness, and got approval to operate it in the military airspace off HMAS Stirling, and we just took it to sea and went flying. You'll see some videos kicking around from social media from within Toll Aviation. But it was a great day out just to see this system seamlessly just launching off the deck, recovering back in. Literally sort of 15 minutes to take it out of a box and get it airborne. Same at the back end. It was a great day out and really showcased what a nimble, current generation, minimal logistic footprint drone can do.
Wow. But I'm really interested. What was the reaction of the crew on board the vessel who had seen this for the first time? Navy. What was their reaction?
Yeah, so to be clear, it wasn't Navy operating the ship.
Right.
So the ship is a decommissioned vessel. It's now owned and operated by Austal.
Right.
And they have a third-party contractor crew that takes it to sea. Look, they were interested for sure. They thought it was great. But that ship itself has been part of an autonomous ship control program. So, the staff on board are pretty used to that as a prototype vessel for doing some cool things.
Right.
So we're not at all related to that program, but they did think it was pretty cool that off this tiny quarter of the deck we could launch and recover a system that can shoot off for 15 hours, do a job, and come on back, or go and land ashore, or go and land on another ship.
Wow.
But great day out.
What a day out. Next time, mate, if you don't mind, I'm available.
For a little while I was operating the payload, and obviously we're in a peacetime environment,
Yes.
and we're in some clear, waters off the WA coast. It was a beautiful day out, but there were whales. So I jumped on the payload for a little while with one of the Shield instructors, and he taught me how to use the payload. So we literally went whale watching. It was fantastic. So we're just on patrol, looking for whales, and then bringing the system in, zooming in. It was an interesting little dimension to the day.
Wow. Mate, I'm interested to dig into a little bit as to how Shield and VBAT ties in with the US national defence industry strategy, but also, more importantly, AUKUS Pillar 2.
Look, the US strategy you refer to, it's a brand new policy. It's 2024. By no means am I an expert on US defence policy, but as I read it, it's the US government encouraging US tech and defence manufacturers to broaden their manufacturing base to increase resilience in the system. So it's my understanding that's encouraging US companies to work with AUKUS partners, to work with Quad partners, to spread the manufacturing base, spread the support base, so that there's resilience in the system in time of conflict. I guess what you're leading to is there the ability for that strategy or that policy to be leveraged to bring that kind of stuff to Australia? There absolutely is. It's a discussion that we've had with Shield. By no means is there a decision to do that, but with the required scale, that's absolutely possible.
So Colin, understanding Navy's doctrine and the newly released National Defence Strategy as well, are you confident that they, one, have interest, and two, can operate off the various classes of vessels that they're operating at the moment?
We're a company that in our support to defence like to research, like to read whatever unclassed doctrine is available. And I could refer to Navy's robotics, autonomous systems and AI strategy and campaign plan. And that certainly talks to, in the immediate term, wanting uncrewed systems that leverage AI, that leverage autonomy. And VBAT would have to be, if not one of the world's best examples and current capabilities to leverage AI in the uncrewed aerial system world. So it's certainly aligned there. I recall in the Navy policy they have a 4PC kind of guidance on acquiring systems. And the 4 Ps, I think one was force projection, so being able to get a system away and give early situational awareness, early warning. The VBAT has a SATCOM capability that pretty much means it's now limited by fuel only. So, it can literally get sort of 350, 400, 450 miles away from a fleet and provide sort of that queuing and situational awareness. The second P is force protection. A current capability of VBAT is to drop a precision-guided munition. It can do that as part of an uncrewed VBAT team. It can do that as part of an uncrewed sort of helicopter VBAT team. That's not a capability we're pitching initially, but it does have the ability to provide some kinetic impact. Another P is potential. So I read that as though Navy would like systems that not at the end of their life, that are more toward the start of their life, and that with that evergreening concept can continue to get better and better and do more and more. And certainly that VBAT reeks of that. It's the tail sitter style that it is relatively new, and I think we'll see more of them in the future, but it's got phenomenal potential. The last P is partnering. So US Coast Guard have just run a highly competitive process, and they've picked the VBAT as their platform for the future. The US Marine Expeditionary Units have been flying VBAT for a couple of years. They love it, and I think it's a mainstay in their program. We look at the Quad. So I could say that all of the other Quad nations have either selected or are in final stages of selection of their Group 3 programs, and that the VBAT's highly competitive throughout that. And I can say that there is some interest in the UK. There is a training capability already in the UK that's been there for a couple of years on VBAT in support of an operation. So if we look at AUKUS and the Quad, that partnering is pretty strong as well. And the 4P, and then there's a C, and I think the C is control or it might be command. And I guess the relevance of VBAT there is, it's been designed from its inception to be fought and operated from the bridge of a US Navy ship or a US Coast Guard vessel. So, it meets all of the requisite STANAGs and whatnot, and it's designed so that it can be integrated into it rather than sort of seeing a laptop on top of a desk in the bridge or whatever it might be. So, from a command or control perspective, they're focused on US alignment, and I think Australia has a maritime sort of common control system, and my understanding is that we're pretty well aligned with that. And we've got some ongoing discussions with a few relevant partners, with Saab, in terms of that common control architecture within the Australian vessels, and with Cubic Defence in terms of making sure that VBAT could be integrated within the maritime synthetic training environment. So if we look at it, Navy, from that 4PC doctrinal perspective, I see a lot of alignment. But all that said, I was at the Maritime Domain Working Group in Canberra a few weeks ago, and it became abundantly clear that the government's focus, and therefore Navy's focus, is on the lethal surface combatant fleet. It is a laser-sharp focus, and the investment in that is going to cause, I guess, some other programs to suffer. Look, I'm confident it's the right platform for civil maritime defence. It's the right platform for Navy's minor war vessels. How Navy feel, well, that remains to be seen.
Colin, we've talked a bit about Navy and obviously their blue water focus. What about when we talk about the littoral capabilities and also organisations like Border Force? You mentioned US Coast Guard before, but if you talk about the Australian Border Force, and also there are a lot of other agencies in the Indo-Pacific as well who could benefit from something like this. But can you tell me a little bit about those closer to shore activities, the capabilities of VBAT, how they can support unintended arrivals or other illegal fishing activities or so on and so forth?
Look, it's fair to say anybody that follows defence and follows border protection is aware that there's a lot of focus right now on the littoral environment. I'll steer away, Toddy, from a Border Force discussion. So there's an aviation-related procurement underway. That sort of means I can't talk a lot about that. It's not a drone procurement, but it's related.
Yep.
But look, Navy have also a role in civil maritime defence and border protection, so I can talk about its suitability there. I mentioned the minor war vessels. So my understanding of the minor war vessel fleet is the offshore patrol vessels. So that's the Arafura class that's coming in. It's the variants of the Cape class, which is operated by the Australian Navy and by Border Force. And Army are also in a rejuvenation program of their landing craft. So they'll have the landing littoral manoeuvre vessels coming in over the next few years. And what I can say with great confidence is the VBAT is able to operate from all of those platforms. If we look specifically at the Arafura class, it has a helicopter deck on it, but it has no hangar. So what VBAT offers there is the ability to conduct flight operations when you need them, and then to put the system away inside the vessel afterwards. One of its essential design criteria right at the start was the major components that it gets packed away in a box in fit through a standard naval hatch. So if you look at Arafura class, you can bring the system in and out of the vessel really, really easy. Competitor systems would need to put a shipping container on the deck or the like in order to store their kit. So Arafura class, it's I think highly suitable. The Cape class, when we were doing the work in WA, we got to have a discussion about Cape class, about where a Group 3 drone or a VBAT might fly from it. And there is alignment that there is a suitable space forward on the forward deck, and that with some pretty minor changes could be operated pretty easily. So I think in that Border Force civil maritime defence role, it's a pretty astounding capability.
Colin, there's lots of geopolitical tension at the moment in media on unauthorised arrivals, not just in Australia, but in the region, in the Indo-Pacific. How quickly could you have this system up and running to assist in those particular programs, and how could you do it?
Yeah, good question. Like I referred to my earlier comment on, I guess that's a primary role of Border Force. So, look, here's what I can say. The VBAT has some great payloads, sort of 3-4 kilogram payloads that would be of great assistance in that environment. It has a synthetic aperture radar from a company called IMSAR, and system flying along at sort of 110 kilometres an hour. With this radar, it's looking 40 nautical miles either side of track at sort of 3,000 to 5,000 feet. And if there's a reasonable sized vessel, it'll pick it up. So there are a combination of sensors which in the literal environment would be phenomenal at cueing other assets to intercept such folks. I mean, your question was how quickly? Look, Shield have as much confidence in their system, of course, as we do. So they are in full rate production right now. So, should there be a need to, rapidly mobilise a capability that's, finely tuned for the littoral environment, that's a capability that could be online in weeks. We've already got the relevant civil aviation approvals. We understand how we would get airspace for that. The system is on the type register. We have local training approval. There are systems on the production line right now rolling off sort of every week. So a rapid mobilisation is absolutely achievable, particularly given the remote areas that we're talking about operating in.
It's interesting, we talk about the lateral transfer of knowledge and skills and also platforms, especially with the work that we're doing in the US, India and here as well. And this just seems like the perfect opportunity to buy something off the shelf, something that's proven, something that our partners are using to help solve a common problem in the region.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. And look, I don't want to give your listeners the thought that this is just a US product, right? So it is a US air vehicle for sure, right? That's where it was designed, developed, fielded, and that's why it's having many millions of dollars in investment in continuous improvement, sort of evergreening cycle. But before we came anywhere near Shield, there was already commercial discussions underway between Shield and a Melbourne-based payload manufacturer, Sentient Vision. So they've had for some time a product in the market called VIDAR that captured Shield's attention. What they want is the best sensors on this system from friendly nations. So that identified already that Sentient's VIDAR system was pretty damn good. They were already in discussions, as it turned out, at that time. And what's transpired since we did the teaming agreement is Shield have actually acquired Sentient Vision. They have invested a whole lot more into that product to supercharge that technology, and they've now got a new product called Sentient Observer, which is will shortly be available on the global export market. So there was an acquisition there for sure, but what that's done is taken Aussie tech and put it on the global market, and I suspect you'll see that payload on coalition nation VBATs pretty soon. Part of our teaming agreement, so we have the right to distribution, sales, training, support, that kind of stuff for sure. But one of the mandates in the agreement is that we work together to integrate Australian tech where it makes sense. So there are several ongoing discussions there. There's another Melbourne-based company called Arceus. They make a hyperspectral optical radar. I'm not going to try and describe what that can do, but it is phenomenally good capability. My understanding is seed funding at the start of that project actually came from the Australian Navy, and it has some really Navy-specific use cases. But Arceus and Shield are absolutely having a discussion about what that might look like. There's another company, AVT Australia. They provide the CM234 payload. That's on the front of the new system that the Australian Army has bought. So there are ongoing feasibility discussions since we did the teaming agreement to look at putting that on the front end of a VBAT as the sort of front EO/IR sensor. Before we came near this agreement, there's already a Brisbane company, Athena AI, that has software on board VBAT doing some really, really cool stuff, like doing the sharp end. And there are some emerging potential integration opportunities. There's another Aussie company called Revero, and they've got a number of things going on, but two of their products that have attracted Shield's attention through our teaming agreement, they've got a detect and avoid system. So that's got to be for a drone, got to be a little lightweight system on board that can detect other air users in vicinity and enable the crew to then avoid them. So it's one of the requirements under ICAO international regs for due regard and to be able to operate on the high seas. So my understanding is, if that conversation hasn't started, it's about to look at, how does the Aussie detect and avoid sensor under development compare to the 2 or 3 other competitors trying to put that onto the VBAT. And Rev Aero also have what they're calling a cognitive EW platform. And again, I'm not an EW guy, so I'm not going to try and explain that. But by definition, that's a learning electronic warfare system that goes on a drone. So that's certainly a payload that coalition nations would be interested in, depending on what it can deliver. So yeah, it's an American air vehicle. There's a lot of IP in the ducted fan that enables that vertical takeoff and land. There's a great deal of IP, and they're, in my opinion, years ahead of anybody else with the AI autopilot. But in the Australian context, you'd see an Aussie payload at the front, an Aussie payload in the belly, Aussie software inside, helping sort of, leverage AI for missions. So, and delivered by an Aussie company in location, Toll Group, who've been around for, well north of 100 years. So, we think it's a good balanced approach, and it could be mobilised really quickly.
So the technology you were talking about just a second ago as well, like we've seen for the last couple of years conflict in the Ukraine, and I believe that there's been a few Shield AI platforms sent to the Ukraine, but other drone systems obviously aren't working as well in GPS denied environments and complex operating systems. How does the Shield AI VBAT get around that?
Yeah, look, another pretty sensitive line of discussion, Toddy. Look, I can say that the VBAT's been operating in complex electromagnetic environments for a period of time. That there's been a lot of learning during that has led to some technical refresh of various systems on board. And I can confirm that, recently, with some innovations on board, it's deliberately been put in the most complex environment that you could have in as at today, and performed exceptionally well. Further detail on that's probably a classified conversation for someone else to have. But look, one of the strong suits of the VBAT is proven ability to operate GPS denied. And again, that's something that's come from design, right? That's when you have an AI chipset on board and an amazing suite of sensors. You put those two things together, and everything complements to enable you to fly along in a completely GPS denied environment.
Gunny, you mentioned a second ago as well, a moment ago, that there are a lot of different Australian-made components on the VBAT. Noting the Australian industry capability requirements, noting local content as well, and noting the fact that there are local Australian OEMs who make unmanned systems. Why not Australian drones? Why not Australian unmanned systems? Why the VBAT?
Yeah, I guess you're referring to the air vehicle itself as opposed to the effects generated by
That's
the
right,
sensors.
sorry.
Like the, I guess we did our due diligence, Todd. So over probably a 12-month period before we did the acquisition of the drone business, we did a lot of homework figuring out, what is the right platform to seize the opportunity or close the gap that I perceive exists in at least civil maritime defence in Australia. We did not find another product anywhere globally that can achieve what VBAT achieves, with such a small footprint. Otherwise, if there was an Australian equivalent solution, we would absolutely have had a look at it. That said, the sort of tail sitter mode, the way that minimises its required space, on a deck, I think is something we'll see other organisations replicate in the future to the degree that that's possible. There may well be in a couple of years' time something that competes with VBAT, but to my knowledge, it's not here now. In terms of our relationship with Australian manufacturers, we have some really good relationships with many of the Aussie drone manufacturers. We are helping several drone manufacturers in Australia in their sort of prototyping flight test stages. We've a pretty strategic relationship with Carbonics, if I can name one, and we've sort of helped them get their platform airborne and get it CASA approved. We help to train their staff and their clients to operate the platform. So we're very well engaged with several Aussie manufacturers. We're openly seeking ways in which to get their platforms commercially earning and operating in the country and internationally. But back to your question, for the particular opportunity we see in specifically civil maritime defence in Australia and border protection, our strategy was VBAT air vehicle, VBAT AI autopilot, and where it makes sense, get Aussie sensors on board, so that those companies are seeing their air vehicle their sensor operate not just in Australia, but reaching into that international market.
And so when we talk about obviously the operating models of Shield and also I guess any UAS, we've seen a number of models: commercially owned, commercially operated, government owned, commercially operated, government owned, government operated. What do you think is the ideal model for this environment, Australia, Indo-Pacific, and especially for this particular system?
Yeah, look, a bit of a cliche, but we are a client-focused organisation, yeah. So we are happy with all of those models. Our White Fleet program with Defence Helicopters you referred to, that is a commercial-owned, government-operated fleet. So we own the helicopters, we put them online, and Army operate them. So perfectly happy in that environment. I mentioned the US Coast Guard recently secured ongoing work for the VBAT. My understanding is that's a COCO model, so commercial-owned, commercial-operated. So that is Shield AI folks on board the Coast Guard vessels operating it on their behalf. And that's the model we're absolutely happy to run with. I'd take a slight, variation from that commercial-owned, commercial-operated model to say, one thing we'd like to do is to offer a hybrid model. So there might be, a client in Australia that an agency that isn't quite where they need to be from a regulatory approval perspective or a people and knowledge perspective to operate a system like the VBAT. But that's where we started as COCO, with us flying, but with an agreement up front. Hey, we're going to mentor your folks. We're going to help you get the relevant approvals through CASA or whatever agency is relevant. We're going to train your people. We're going to write your manuals, and you can expect in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months that this is your capability. And hey, if you want us to come back once a year and test your pilots and make sure you're standardised, no problems at all. Look, in the Navy context, Shield have been flying VBAT off the back of the US Marine Expeditionary Units for a couple of years. They've done around 17 6-month deployments all over the globe. So does Toll have the corporate and risk appetite to be operating drones from a military vessel? Absolutely. In a small way, I mentioned earlier we were flying soldiers around in Timor on a peacekeeping operation for a few years. We were flying federal police on another peacekeeping mission for about 7 years. In the Solomon Islands, and we are, of the operational workforce, somewhere like 70 to 80% veteran. So, I think we have a great capacity in a risk-managed and corporate-friendly environment to run a commercial-operated fleet, at least initially, in any environment that Australians are happy to go to.
Gunny, you've explained really well today how innovative Shield AI is. Tell me, what's next?
Yeah, look, I'll start that by saying, what's recent. So in the last 12 months, the HiveMind AI autopilot, so the same autopilot that's in the VBAT, was used to fly an uncrewed F-16, a live uncrewed F-16 in air-to-air combat. And what an AI autopilot does in a fast jet is lets you operate that platform to the structural limits of the aircraft, which are way, way, way more than the structural limits of the human who's trying to fly it. So in pretty short order, an instrumented F-16, no person flying it, is autonomously operating, dogfighting against multiple other F-16s and winning the battle. So that's what's recent, right? That's pretty astounding. So if you can use that AI hardware and software to enable an F-16 to autonomously fight in a live dogfight, there's plenty more that it can do, including in the Group 3 space. What's next? Look, that remains to be seen. There's a lot of work right now with collaborative combat aircraft. So you might have heard of the Ghost Bat, which might be produced just up the road near Toowoomba. Well, that's a collaborative combat aircraft. That's a one is to many kind of an operation. So the Shield's AI autopilot, I understand, is in really high demand from just about every coalition nation who's having a look at collaborative combat aircraft. And very recently, and this is in the press, Shield employed the former chief engineer of SpaceX. Now you can imagine what kind of fellow was working in SpaceX to run that show. And I wait with great interest to see some innovations that I know are coming, and no doubt that will come in the near future as he supercharges the innovation flair that they already had.
Wow. Colin, I'm mindful of time. I guess I've got the benefit of having worked with you for a number of years, and still to this day we help you with some analytics and solution design bits and pieces. But I know that everyone listening today or watching today would have got a lot of information and a lot of value out of what you provided today. And you've lifted the lid on a very important topic, not only around what is available, but what we need moving forward as well. So I want to really sincerely thank you for your time today, mate, and look forward to getting some further updates on Toll Aviation, but also with what's happening in the UAS world.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Look, mate, it's a privilege to come in and discuss it, and it's pretty good to reflect upon what we've achieved in sort of the 16, 17 months since we started operating Uncrewed systems.
Mate, it's crazy, and well done to you and your team, mate. You've taken a vision and you've turned it into reality. So, well done.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate your time.